Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio. And now, here's our host, Dr. Vanessa Anceloni.
Welcome, dear Kardec Radio listener. Today we have a show about the healing angel of God, and healing is something that everybody is looking for. It's likely that due to the nature of our perishable physical body, everybody looks for healing. But nowadays, people look for healing beyond the physical matter. They look forward to be healed mentally and actually spiritually. That's why Kardec Radio is here today proposing these reflections on healing. Very recently, in the Oprah show, we had this question: do you believe in miracles? And miracles are something that have been in humankind discussed and seen and experienced since ancient times. And Dr. Jeffrey Rediger from Harvard University Hospital was in the Oprah show talking about his own experience and also from the perspective of being a physician, a psychiatrist, especially in regard to healing mediumship. It was about John of God, the Brazilian medium that has attracted the attention of many people in the world, not only the Brazilians. We all know in Brazil there are many healing mediums, but John of God in specific has attracted the attention of many. And this September, at the end of the month of September, he is going to be again at the Omega Institute. Many people are looking forward to be healed. But how does it happen? Is it really possible that people are healers or healing mediums? So today we're going to talk mostly to our guest speaker, Dr. Jeffrey Rediger. We are truly honored for his time that he's dedicating to talk to us, to our dear listeners. Who is Dr. Jeffrey Rediger? For those who haven't come across yet his amazing experience and his new line of work. Dr. Jeffrey Rediger is a physician and is actually the medical director of McLean Hospital Southeast and an instructor in the Department of Psychiatry at Harvard Medical School. He's a fully licensed physician and board-certified psychiatrist. He is also a Master of Divinity from Princeton Theological Seminary, and he publishes in the fields of medicine, psychiatry, and spirituality. He's in the team of these very leading minds on medicine and spirituality on our planet. He is one of these pioneering missionary minds who are opening new venues for discussion on a possible new paradigm for medicine. And talking about the new paradigm for medicine, we all know about the foundation of the International Spiritist Medical Association by Dr. Marlene Nobre from Brazil. And then, since then, she started spreading out with a team of colleagues, Spiritist physicians and health practitioners, talking about the importance of revisiting the concept of spirituality and medicine and bridging them both. Recently, since 2006-2007, Dr. Sonia Doi, who is also a physician and a spiritist located in the area of Germantown, Maryland, United States of America, she took the lead on opening the United States Medical Spiritist Association, and she has been promoting bi-yearly seminars and congress and workshops, bringing people from across the world to talk about these very topics on spirituality and medicine, talking about the proposal of a new paradigm. And amongst these minds that are promoting this revolution in our healthcare, which, by the way, needs certainly a reform, needs an urgent change, is Dr. Jeffrey Rediger. And let's go back to our source before we bring into the show Dr. Rediger. Allan Kardec, this amazing mind from the 19th century, a true missionary, an educator in Paris, France, at a time in which the intellectual life of our planet was fully located in France. This educator, researcher, he started opening up a new view of life. He published many books, amongst them the first one, The Spirit's Book, and it's quite unique, the method and the procedure. And in one of the 1019 questions and answers, on specifically question 556, he asked the illuminated spirits through the mediums of the time, because Kardec himself was not an ostensible medium, he was a researcher. And he asked them, do certain individuals really possess the gift of healing by simple touch? And the answer of them was, their magnetic power may act to the extent when it is aided by purity of feelings and an ardent desire to do good. For then good spirits come to their aid. It is necessary, however, to distrust the way stories are told by very gullible or enthusiastic individuals who are always ready to see the miraculous in the simplest and most natural things. One must always distrust the self-interested claims of persons who exploit credulity for their own profit. This is amazing. Amazing because many people think that just by believing in the presence of discarnate entities, we shall believe in anything. And Kardec is getting here a lesson from the illuminated minds themselves, teaching us that we should really think very carefully whether or not we are seeing more than the eyes can actually see. But is this what we're talking about when people tell us about healing and John of God and this healing by simple touch? Is it possible? Yes, personally, I've been raised in a Spiritist family. I've always been exposed to healing mediums of different natures in Brazil itself, just like John of God. And John of God himself, I remember in 2005, when visiting him first time, due to this invitation by an American friend who lives in Chicago, Amy Bianc, I had the opportunity with a few friends to meet with him and experience some form of healing. Quite unbelievable. But what is happening on the behind the scene? And here Kardec learns from the illuminated spirits that there are elements that are essential for these operations to happen. First, the purity of feeling sentiments, and then this very strong desire to do good. And John of God and many others are like this. Few things happen and they believe in anything. Why we're saying this? Because here we're going to call the attention of our listener to the importance of the true healing. In Spiritism, we propose the healing of the soul. The healing of the body is always temporary, because sooner or later the body is going to perish and will be called back to our true spiritual home. There is a passage by Jesus that was described by the amazing mind of the writer Humberto de Campos, the Brazilian writer who was deceased at the time, and through the hands of the amazing medium Chico Xavier, the best medium of all times, and the most productive, by the way, who brought many teachings through the books, the 400 plus books that he received by the spirits, and the amazing charitable works he did. Chico Xavier brought in this book that's not translated into English yet, named Boa Nova, maybe Good News. This teaching in which Jesus, a true account, Jesus was at Peter's home, and many people used to come to be healed, and they were there. It was so crowded that there was this one paralytic man that couldn't come in at all through the door. either from the front door or the back door. So many people helped him go into the house to see Jesus and receive a possible healing experience by bringing him from the roof. How many people take their planes, travel everywhere and elsewhere, including to these experiences like going to see John of God. And just like this man, the paralytic man, he received the healing from Jesus. And Jesus told him, now you go and don't sin again. Well, at the end of the day, usually Jesus would walk by the beach, and this time Peter was with him walking by the beach. Peter, just like a child, learning the new things of spirituality, he was very talkative. He was excited, telling Jesus, oh, Master, did you see how many people we've healed? It's so amazing, it's fascinating how many people were helped. And Jesus kept himself silent. And then, at one point, Peter turns and looks at Jesus' face and observes that tears are rolling down from his cheeks, on his cheeks. And then he, as a child, he turns to the Master and says, yeah, Master, I know you're very moved by the amazing healings we've done today. And then Jesus, at some point, he stops and says, Peter, my tears are not of joy, they are of sadness. Sadness because, do you think my Father sent me here to heal the body? So we are here, healed in the mind, is then inviting us for this opportunity to reflect on our own selves, this childishness in some way and form, in which we are looking for this temporary healing, but we forget about the deepest healing. There's nothing wrong about the healing of the body, but if we forget about the deep meaning. We're calling everybody here to reflect on the spirituality and its importance in our lives. So let us reflect on this by listening to this case from the book Heaven and Hell, Mrs. Anna Gourdon.
An excerpt from the book Heaven and Hell by Allan Kardec, Chapter 2 from Part 2, Mrs. Anna Gourdon. Mrs. Gourdon, a very young woman known for her gentle character and eminent moral qualities, passed away in November of 1860. She belonged to a family of miners from around Saint-Etienne, a circumstance that made her spiritual position quite interesting. Evocation.
I'm here.
Your husband and your father have asked me to evoke you and would be happy to receive a communication.
And I would be happy to give them one.
Why were you taken from your family affections at such a young age?
Because I had finished my earthly trials.
Can you see your relatives sometimes?
Oh, I am always nearby.
Are you a happy spirit?
I am. I hope, wait, and love. The heavens do not scare me, and I await with confidence and love for the sprouting of my white wings.
What do you mean by white wings?
When I become a pure spirit, as resplendent as these celestial messengers who are dazzling me.
Kardec then explains that the wings of angels, archangels, and seraphim, who are nothing more than pure spirits, are obviously only an attribute imagined by humans to portray the speed at which they move, for their ethereal nature makes any aid unnecessary for crossing space. However, they may appear to humans with such accessories to be in harmony with human thought, just as spirits take on the appearance they had on earth in order to be recognizable. Kardec then resumes the questioning by asking, can your relatives do anything on your behalf?
They can stop saddening me with their mourning. They know I'm not lost forever to them. I want their memory of me to be sweet, light, and fragrant. My stay on earth was like a flower's, and nothing sorrowful should remain of that brief stay.
How can your language be so poetic and so little in keeping with your position while on earth?
It is my soul that speaks. Yes, I possessed previously acquired knowledge. Also, God often allows delicate spirits to incarnate amongst more rustic men to enable them to perceive the refinement and understanding they will acquire later on.
And then finally, Kardec explains that without this highly logical explanation, which is so much in harmony with God's kindness towards God's creature, it would be difficult to understand what might at first glance seem to be an anomaly. In reality, though, what could be more poetic and gracious than the language of this refined young woman in the midst of the roughest work environment? The opposite often occurs as well. Low-order spirits incarnate among highly advanced people, but for the opposite purpose. It is for their own advancement that God places them in contact with an enlightened environment for their instruction, or so that they might act as an instrument of trial. What other philosophy could resolve such anomalies?
Yes, dear listener, this is a case from the book Heaven and Hell by Allan Kardec. These accounts of the spirits, we call, the spirits, people call them ghosts, people call them entities. When the physical body dies, we spiritists know that we keep on living and we can come back and communicate. As Allan Kardec says in the first chapter of the book, the Medium's Book, which is this year completing 150 years of its publishing. In the Medium's Book, first chapter, it asks this question: are there spirits? When we talk about healing and entities, just like John of God talks about entities of the beyond healing through his hands, what is that he is talking about? Allan Kardec explains it to us in the Medium's Book. And the compelling evidence is everywhere and elsewhere. And we want to talk more about this. Bring the reflections, bring discussions, valid discussions. We know science has not proved, in some way and form, has not proved it yet. But what about our personal experiences? What does science have to say about it? So we have in our show Dr. Jeffrey Rediger, and right after our break, we're going to bring him in to discuss his own experience with the John of God and the research he has been leading in regard to the cases of healing at John of God in Brazil.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Kardec Radio, live every Saturday at 11 a.m.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Join us every Thursday live, Evolution in Two Worlds, a journey of the soul through the teachings of the Spirit Doctor, Andrea Luiz. Connect at www.tvcei.com, Channel 2.
Want to win a Kardec Radio bumper sticker? Give us a call at 858-769-4705 or send an email to kardec@kardecradio.com.
So, dear listener, we are here on the show about healing and John of God. It's a live show. We're talking about this healing mediumship and the fact that many people, more and more, they are talking about these experiences they've been having, not only at John of God, but mostly at John of God. And we're going to discuss the possibilities why it has attracted so much attention to people in Brazil. And we have here in the show with us Dr. Jeffrey Rediger, who is a medical director of McLean Hospital Southeast and the instructor in the Department of Psychiatry at Harvard Medical School. He is a fully licensed physician and a board-certified psychiatrist. He has a Master of Divinity degree from Princeton Theological Seminary, and he publishes in the fields of medicine, psychiatry, and spirituality. Hi, Dr. Rediger. Welcome to Kardec Radio.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Dr. Rediger, we are delighted to have you here because we have a lot to reflect and to learn. And we've got to know of your work and your experience through the Oprah show very recently when she brought in this discussion about if people believe in miracles or not.
Sure.
So we'd like to ask you, first question, being a psychiatrist, have you noticed in some way, form, or observed patients with signs or symptoms of what people call possession or spirit attachment?
Yes, I have. It's been quite a journey for me to begin thinking about all of this differently, and certainly Allan Kardec's work and the experiences I had in Brazil with not only John of God but with other Brazilian spiritists and healers have had a dramatic and profound influence on my life and way of thinking about all of this. I had first been exposed to the idea of possession when I was a undergraduate in college and went on a missions trip in Colombia, South America, and participated in what was thought to be an exorcism. And then when I was in seminary at Princeton, a gentleman in the maximum security prison where I was doing an internship had what he believed was a possession, and there was a very dramatic experience that occurred there. But it wasn't really until my time in Brazil interviewing different healers, including John of God, that I began to think about all of this very differently and began to realize just how reductionistic the form of medicine that I was trained in really is, where we reduce all symptoms to a very physical explanation, and we only really see a narrow band of reality, which is the neurochemical. And so if a person is hallucinating, we tend to think that's only because there's a neurochemical imbalance, but we never consider the possibility that the neurochemical imbalance may be just one very narrow dimension of interacting with a more invisible world that we don't typically in the West know how to understand or interact with.
That's very interesting. So you would consider in your practice, though maybe not fully disclose to your patient, the fact that there is some form of spirit attachment that is playing a role in the overall state of his or her mind?
Absolutely. I hear people every day, of course, who are seeing things and hearing voices, and I now, because of the Allan Kardec's writings largely and my experiences in Brazil, I've come to believe that the spiritual reality is a more primary reality than the world that we can see and touch. And so I have seen a number of people who actually function better than the average person, and they also hear voices and have mystical experiences or have a wider range of perception than many of us do, and many times they are afraid to acknowledge their wider capacity to sense the larger invisible world to themselves even or to others, because they don't want to be regarded as crazy, and they themselves wonder if they might be crazy or something wrong with them. I believe that now, because of all of this, I've come to believe that the world of that to have a sensitive soul that can perceive a wider range of reality, much in the way that some animals can perceive a range of sound that human beings cannot. People who are truly spiritually sensitive just may experience a wider range of reality, especially of a more invisible reality. The point is, I think, is how much have they developed themselves as individuals, because all of us either sink or swim in the seas of the expanded consciousness. And so if a person is really struggling, they will look psychotic and really be impaired or struggle with hearing voices or seeing things. But people who've really developed themselves, or perhaps are more evolved souls, will actually be able to function and swim better than the rest of us.
It's interesting you're saying this, Dr. Rediger, and because there is a psychiatrist in Brazil who is also a spiritist, Dr. Alexander Moreira. He brought the evidence that the mental state of people who undergo the training of spiritist mediumship, which is a way to educate these perceptions and make it productive to the general good, they're actually more balanced than the normal people that don't experience even mediumistic experiences, which is pretty much what you're saying.
Well, he's on top of really important then that has profound implications for how we understand how to help people recover from illnesses.
Exactly. So do you think by any chance this increase in depression in our planet could be at some point, I don't want to be linear or reductionist here, but do you think that the fact that people may be becoming more sensitive, more fully aware of their, let's say, sixth sense perception and not knowing what to do with them, they may sink in these states of sometimes unexplainable depression? Can you tell in that regard as a psychiatrist?
Oh, I think that's a great question because I think, unfortunately, the world is changing, and I think there is something new that's trying to be born, a higher sensibility or a step forward in the consciousness of all of us. And unfortunately, I think what medicine and psychiatry are typically doing is shutting people down instead of helping them develop in a way that they can become more of who they are and function with a wider, deeper, or more expanded consciousness.
That's interesting. So how did you get interested in the work of John of God and these experiences in Brazil? How was it for you?
Well, so basically what happened was I went to seminary and then went to med school, and I really was struggling with trying to understand these two worlds that in some ways are very different. And the short story is that during my residency at Harvard, I was asked to help start an institute on psychological and spiritual development, and that's what I named it. And then I was seeing some patients, and this is just after I finished residency, and there was a young man whose mother asked me if I would help him because he had a spiritual experience that had made.
We probably missed Dr. Rediger, and until we get him back here, we are going to have you listen to this amazing excerpt of the Medium's book when Allan Kardec talks about healing mediumship and ask some questions to the illuminated spirits. We'll be right back with Dr. Rediger and his experience at John of God.
An excerpt from the Medium's book by Allan Kardec, items 175 and 176, Healing Mediums.
We shall only mention here this variety of mediums because the subject would require a much greater development than our present purposes will allow. Moreover, we have been informed that a doctor friend of ours has proposed to address this subject in a special work or intuitive medicine. We will only say that this kind of mediumship consists mainly in the gift that some people have a healing by simple touch, by a look, or even a gesture, without resorting to any medication whatsoever. This will certainly be regarded simply as magnetism, and it is obvious that the magnetic fluid plays a large role. However, when the phenomenon is examined with due care, one may easily recognize the presence of something more. Magnetization is a bona fide form of treatment requiring a methodical and regular sequence. In mediumistic healing, however, matters proceed in an entirely different manner. All magnetizers are able to heal to some degree if they know how to go about it correctly. But among healing mediums, the faculty is spontaneous, and they sometimes possess it without ever having heard of magnetism.
Hello?
The intervention of a hidden power, the characteristic of mediumship, becomes obvious in certain circumstances, especially when we consider that most of the individuals who qualify as healing mediums resort to prayer, and this prayer in itself becomes a true evocation. Following are responses we received from the spirits on the subject. May we regard individuals gifted with magnetic power as forming a variety of mediumship.
You should have no questions about that.
So mediums are intermediaries between spirits and humans, while magnetizers who draw upon their own forces do not appear to serve as intermediaries for any foreign power.
That is an erroneous idea. The magnetic force belongs to the individuals, but is augmented with the help of the spirits to whom they appeal for it. For example, if you use magnetism to heal, and you evoke a good spirit who takes an interest in both you and the sick person, it augments your own forces and willpower by directing your fluids and giving them the necessary qualities.
Nonetheless, there are excellent magnetizers who do not believe in spirits.
So do you think that the spirits only act upon those who believe in them? Those who magnetize for good purposes are aided by good spirits. All those with moral aspirations call to them without realizing it, in the same way that through the desire for evil and bad intentions, others call to evil ones.
Would magnetizers who believe in the intervention of spirits act more effectively?
They could do things that will be regarded as miracles.
Do some individuals actually have the gift of being able to heal by simply touch without employing magnetic passes?
Certainly. Haven't you seen several examples?
Do such cases involve magnetic action or only the influence of spirits?
Both. Such individuals are bona fide mediums since they act under the influence of spirits, but that does not mean that they are what you understand to be healing mediums, for example.
Is this power transmittable?
Not the power itself, but rather the understanding of what is needed to exert it when one possesses it. There are those who would not even suspect they had this power if they did not think it had been transmitted to them.
Can healing be effected through prayer alone?
Yes, sometimes God allows this. However, it is sometimes for sick persons' own good to continue to suffer, and then they think their prayers have not been heard.
Are certain prayer formulas more effective than others for healing?
Only superstition could attribute virtue to certain words, and only ignorant or deceitful spirits could entertain such an idea by prescribing formulas. However, for persons who are little enlightened and incapable of understanding purely spiritual matters, the use of a formula might contribute to deepening their confidence. In such a case, it is not the formula that is effective, but rather the faith that has been augmented by the belief attached to the use of the formula.
So much to learn with this amazing book, The Medium's Book. Before The Medium's Book, there's nothing on the matter trying to teach us so consistently and so safely about the practice of mediumship. It's the new era of the spirit that the amazing spirits at Kardec's time brought to us through his diligent efforts as a visionary and an educator, and everything is there to teach us about the mediumship in general. And this excerpt that you've just listened is about healing mediumship. How much we can do on earth by joining forces with the loving minds of one. How do we do it? So Dr. Rediger was just telling us these very interesting cases that he was talking about in his reflections on mediumship in general. And right before we lost him, he was sharing his experience about his encounter with John of God and other mediums in Brazil, healers or healing mediums, And here is Dr. Rediger again with us. Hi, Jeff. Thank you for coming back to the show. So how was it, the experience, and how did you actually start diverting your interest into these healing mediumship experiences?
So I had a young man who came to see me, sent by his mother, who was a nurse at Mass General, which is a prominent teaching hospital at Harvard in Boston. And she then came in on our second session and wanted to speak to her son, and she told him that she had cancer of the pancreas that was metastatic and which is thought to be typically, for most people, a terminal illness that people die from, and there's not a lot that treatment can do except to delay death for a short time. And so the short story is that she eventually decided to go down and see John of God. She believed that she went down there, was going to stay a matter of days, ended up staying for 2 weeks over Thanksgiving of, I think, 2002, I believe, and then had what she believed was a healing of her cancer of the pancreas. And she started to just change during those months that I was seeing her and her son. She had always been a very sweet and lady, a good mother and wife and a dedicated nurse, but she began to change in many ways as she grew spiritually, and she began to talk about the love that she'd experienced down in Brazil at the Casa and how this love was changing her, and she was realizing that the soul is immortal, that the soul lives forever, and that the body is just a temporary envelope, and that the spiritual world is the primary reality and is really the cause of physical reality, which is a very different understanding than the West that I'd experienced in both medical school and even seminary, frankly. So as I watched her change before my eyes, and then she began to have people call me saying that they had had healings and that I needed to look at what had happened for them, I, as a young professor at Harvard, as a new medical director, just out of residency, and I was too afraid, really. I was very interested, but didn't really know how to proceed with this. But finally, I decided to go down to Brazil and began gathering laboratory tests and CT scans from before and after contact with these spiritist healers to see if there was evidence that a healing had actually occurred.
That's interesting, Dr. Rediger. And how has it been, like, when you were there, we saw in the Oprah show that you had this spontaneous bleeding experience. At the time, you were told that this is basically a form of invisible surgery. Do you have any form of explanation that you have come across since then?
Well, I think the truth is I've been deeply changed and influenced in my way of thinking and way of living by what happened in Brazil. That was really a turning point for my life, kind of the waistline of the hourglass for me, in terms of that's where everything kind of now has been changed and reinterpreted. It took me a number of years. It happened in 2003, and I wasn't sure what. I knew it meant that everything I'd been taught in seminary and medical school and residency in psychiatry was, in a sense, upside down from what reality must be like. If a person can say, I believe it in my head, but I don't believe it in my heart, there's evidence that something's being healed here, but I don't get it, I don't understand it, and then a little 1/8 inch horizontal incision opens up on the chest in the area over my heart and begins to bleed profusely, then I believe it in my head, I don't believe it in my heart, and I begin to bleed. That means that physical reality is not the primary reality. That's what I've concluded must be the case, that the spiritual reality must be the cause of physical existence, and therefore the physical existence is really, our physical bodies are more a metaphor for something we're trying to learn spiritually, and our physical bodies are not the primary reality. That's one lesson I've taken from all of this.
It's interesting because it changes the way we see ourselves and one another. And I remember reading in your website that after this experience, your life changed completely. How did that change?
in many ways. It's taken me a long time to begin putting words to all of this and figure out what it means, but it implies a whole different way of understanding medicine and psychiatry. I've started to realize that in medical school and even in many ways in seminary, I was trained to see the physical body as being the primary reality. That's what Western culture believes, as I understand it, and the gift of Western culture has been to define the physical laws of the universe. So now we have all these laws of physics, we know how physical objects interact, and we have the birth of science and technology and all these things that are the gifts of Western world historically to humanity. But I've started to realize that the next step now is to begin understanding that the physical world is, from a higher perspective, just an illusion. It's much more changeable than we have any understanding of, and it's based upon what's happening spiritually in our ideas and in our hearts, and that what changes in our ideas and what changes in our hearts actually changes physical reality when those changes occur at a deep level. And that's been an astonishing discovery for me, and it's changing the way I think about everything. And it's taking me a long time to begin understanding how different our model of medicine needs to change to take into account this fundamental reality.
You're so right, and you can count on us for sure. We have here the whole Spiritist movement also in the United States to give you support, and especially I know the Medical Spiritist Association, and there is a whole movement already trying to see how possibly we can change this paradigm of medicine, and we don't know many answers.
Well, I think there's a lot we can do. I've now founded the Center for Psychological and Spiritual Development, and I'm going to write. I'm writing now a little handbook for medical and psychiatric patients. And what's great is the whole world is becoming ready for this change. We now know, for instance, that the physical laws which Newton defined hundreds of years ago do tell us about how physical objects and how our physical bodies behave. But from a higher perspective, we now know on the basis of quantum mechanics that all of this, the physical world, the evidence of the five senses, is actually an illusion from a higher perspective. And it's very consistent with Spiritism that the world that we can see and touch is true to a point, but from a higher perspective, the world is not what it appears to be, that we are not who we appear to be. And so all of this has initiated me into a much deeper understanding of the real causes of our illnesses and the source of healing.
So when you open these the Center for Spiritual Development, Psychological and Spiritual Development, I know if people go to the website, you ask them if they have stories to share. So what is the major plan to get the stories and then unfold the underpinnings of possible spiritual, mental correlations?
Yes. What I'm really looking for is, because I have to approach this as a scientist, if we're going to bring about a paradigm change, we have to have facts that show that spiritual reality is primary to and causative for everything that happens in the physical reality into our physical bodies. So I'm collecting stories and laboratory evidence where we have the CT scans or the laboratory results of a situation where a person has an illness and then they have a spiritual experience or a contact with a spiritual healer, and the physical illness then either goes away or changes dramatically. I want, first of all, the factual evidence that something changed, and then I am interviewing these people and getting the stories, because what seems to happen in the majority of cases is that some deep change occurs in the psyche of the individual, which typically is that they begin to realize that they matter far more than they had a clue about, that they bring an unrepeatable dignity and goodness into the world that is far greater than they realized. And then when they have that experience, the physical body seems to catch up with that change in their mind or their hearts, and that results in a healing experience.
Dr. Rediger, we have so many questions to make you, and we have callers already. lined up so to ask you some questions. So we're going to give another short break of 2 minutes, and we'll be right back with you and the callers.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Spiritist Network, your gateway to on-demand Spiritist videos. www.spiritistnetwork.com.
Spread the word. Kardec Radio, to learn more about Spiritism.
Kardec Radio, live every Saturday at 11 a.m.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Enrich your spiritual senses and deepen your foundations of Spiritism with the book, What is Spiritism? By Allan Kardec. Buy your copy online or via your ebook reader. Go to www.ediceiofamerica.com today.
Join the Third Spiritist Forum of New York on September 25th. The theme is It is Good to Be Good, featuring the keynote speaker, Dr. Stephen Post, renowned and leading scientist on compassion and health, as well as Dr. Petrillo and Dr. Saloni. More information at www.nvscenter.org. That is www.nvscenter.org.
And now we return to our program.
Dear Kardec Radio listener, we have here a special show. A show about what many of us, if not all of us, are looking for: healing. Who doesn't need some form of healing, no matter our age, no matter our social, economic background? We all have this search for healing. Healing of the mind, healing of the body, healing of relationships, healing in so many ways. So Dr. Rediger was just telling us about his courageous approach, proposing a new paradigm, ways and means for us to understand spirituality from a different perspective. And when we talk about healing, we talk about this question 556 of the Spirit's book, in which Dr. Rediger, Allan Kardec, told to us the answer of the Spirit when he asked this question to certain individuals, really people that gift of healing by simple. It's a Spirit book, which was published in 1857, and it's not outdated. It's considered the constitution of our soul, something quite unique that to date answered questions to us about ourselves in all different features of life, from what is God, which is question number 1. You see the difference, not who is God, because God is not a human being, is not even a being, and what is God, a more general, open question. So the answer is the supreme intelligence of the universe, first cause of all things. And when we talk about the supreme intelligence of the universe, first cause of all things, then we have the implications of this answer, which are lined up in the other 1,018 questions and answers of the Spirit's book. Without this foundational answer, nothing else unfolds. So Allan Kardec taught us to have faith and combine it with reason. As he said, the unshakable faith is the one that walks hand in hand, I'd say this way, with reason at all times. So when we talk about healing mediumship, we shall invite in our reasoning as well to unfold precisely what happens to these cases of healing. Many people are asking, so when you get healed, what happens? Is it possible for people really to be healed? And the answer to Allan Kardec's question, 556 of the Spirit's book, was this: their magnetic power may act to the extent when it is aided by purity of sentiments and ardent desire to do good, for then good spirits come to their aid. And we are bringing this again, an excerpt of the answer of the spirits to Kardec questions in regard to the fact that he wanted to know, are there really healing mediums? So in that regard, we really need to know that there are combinations. Feelings are important. How many people think that to be spiritual, all you need to do is simply to mind your business, feel whatever you feel, evoke the spirits of the illuminated mind, and they come as if they were slaves. Many people treat the entities as slaves, which is surprising. That's why in the Medium's book by Allan Kardec, we learned that the rules of the game are such, of spirit interaction and spirit communication, that if we want to be in touch or be instruments of the higher minds of the beyond, we need to elevate our feelings. We need to really have this inner desire to do good. And what is more amazing is the fact that we need to process this selflessness. Finally, we have here our dear Dr. Rediger. Hi, Jeff. You're back with us.
Yes, I'm not sure what happened again.
Okay, don't worry. Our Kardec radio is being healed by your presence. So it shall be fine. And we now have a few callers who would like to ask you questions. And I'll bring in James from Canada, who has been here with us since the beginning of the program, and he wants to ask you a question. Hi, James. Thank you for joining Kardec Radio.
Oh, thanks very much. My name is Jay, but thanks so much. Anyway, it's a very interesting show, and listening to Jeffrey. Thanks so much, Jeffrey, for being on the show, and it's just great to hear you. So, you're very welcome. Hey, I just wondered regarding facts. Why is it that you require facts for gathering when the healing has occurred? When it's just, in the spiritual world, we just know that it works. Is this because that most of the society is basically left brain, and they have to have trust and faith that it has to be on paper that okay, this has happened and this has occurred. So I just wondered about that.
Well, that's a great question. I think that most healings that occur probably don't have a factual basis that one can prove, and I think people who are more developed in their faith can discern more easily what's a genuine healing and what isn't, and especially by looking at the fruit of one's life in terms of what happens afterwards. But to convince a medical community and to bring about a paradigm change, I think we have to have a way of mediating between the physical world and the spiritual world, because we are a culture that believes in what we can see and touch. And so I think in part for myself, but also because of the situation I'm in as medical director and professor at a academic institution, I have to prevent from being kind of laughed out of the academic halls of learning. I have to be able to say, listen, you think what you want, but you have to look at the evidence and let the evidence speak for itself. And I think that's the only way to quell skepticism ultimately. And this is all the early stages. I do believe that later I'll be able to look at more or deeper healings in a wider range that don't have necessarily physical evidence, but I have to start with the evidence, I think, the factual evidence, to show that the spiritual reality really is the primary reality.
Thank you, Jay, and I'm sorry for the confusion about your name. Thank you for joining us, and we are very glad that you're enjoying Kardec Radio.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for your question. It's an excellent question.
Dr. Rediger, now we have Dr. Yasko Arakawa, who is a neuroscientist and also a spiritist. She wants to ask you a question about your personal experience. Hi, Yasko.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us.
Hi, hello.
Hi, hello, Dr. Rediger. Thank you for your speech and your testimony of this, our being more than just a biochemical machinery, but a whole being of mind and physical body. So my question is, it seemed to me, listening to your life since you were a student, that you were already like contesting or not comfortable with this, how the medicine sees beings as just machinery, as I say. So it looked like you were already a different person with more sense of this holistic sense of our being. Did you personally have some experience of this, some more psychic, holistic sense? This is one question.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah. I believe that I had for a long time, since childhood, a sense that the world as I was being taught about it wasn't quite the way it really must be, and that made me very confused. I went on a spiritual journey and just trying to understand what was true, and I read hundreds of theologians. I never intended to be a minister, but I went to seminary to try to figure out what was true, and so I struggled to just try to give words to something, to a deep discontent within me, really, that I couldn't make sense of the world as it was being taught to me. And it's only been in the last number of years and what I experienced in Brazil and the way of thinking introduced to me by Allan Kardec after I'd already had a 3-year Master of Divinity from seminary really was like medicine to my soul in terms of helping me begin to put words to something deep inside of me that I was struggling to find a way to understand.
That's so interesting, and thank you, Yasko, for being with us and for asking this question.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Okay, so Dr. Rediger, when you talked oftentimes about Allan Kardec, so how would you describe these teachings or the books that were published by him? What is your perception on them?
Well, I think they're marvelous books in terms of just graceful style, but there's really 3 things that fundamentally changed my understanding of reality as a result of reading all of this. And number 1 is that the physical reality is not the primary reality, and that's something that Allan Kardec taught me, and that the spiritual world is the primary reality, and the physical world is really a effect of that, which means that Western medicine is just treating symptoms most of the time instead of treating causes, and to realize that illnesses originate in the soul and then eventually manifest in the body was a revolution for me. And then to begin realizing that the way you treat illnesses, it's fine to treat symptoms for a while, but if you want to treat the cause of your suffering, you have to go back and change something that's deep in our souls in terms of how we understand who we are. The second thing that was a revolution for me was to begin to realize that we all matter far more than we have a clue about typically, and we suffer because we don't realize the dignity and goodness of our lives. Western theology, I'm sorry to say, more or less is rooted in a deep feeling that there's something bad or wrong with who we are, that we're sinful creatures fundamentally at the core of our being. And Kardec was one of the first ones to help me begin realizing that at the core of all of us there's something unrepeatable and dignified and good that nothing can take away, that the soul is immortal and good and created by God. And that was a revolution for me in terms of truly experiencing that.
We are quite moved by your reflections on this as well. It really feels like you have a courageous mind to bridge up our current understanding on health in general and these needed visionary ways in which probably you've heard about this, and talking about visionary ways of treating patients. You've heard when you were in Brazil or probably visited these spiritist psychiatric hospitals.
Yes.
Yes, and what is your intake in that regard?
Well, and I haven't visited those hospitals as much as read about them and talked to people about them. I do believe that the invisible world is more real than I had any idea about, and so the idea that the invisible world is peopled by other beings makes a lot more sense to me now, that the soul is immortal and that when we die nothing really ends, we just transition to a different state and we discard the envelope of the body. That's a really different way of understanding things for somebody like me who spends every day in an intensive care unit and is surrounded by a culture of medicine that's terrified of death and believes that death is the end in many ways. It's been liberating for me in the way I work with patients. It's great for patients to realize that the way to heal is to begin to realize the significance and dignity of who they are, because so many of our illnesses at a deep level are about feeling worthless or unloved or lonely or like there's something defective or wrong with us.
Exactly, and being a psychologist and graduating from the University of São Paulo in Brazil, I've had a chance to see how the spiritist approach is being brought in the psychiatric organizations, institutions in Brazil, and it totally changes the perspective. And that's the reason why, Dr. Rediger, on September 17th, we're going to have a whole show at Kardec Radio about the spiritist psychiatric hospitals in Brazil. So hopefully we can bring that model to the United States one day.
Yes, that would be a revolution, and it would heal so many of our medical and psychiatric problems, and people would experience psychiatry as a liberating force instead of as something to be ashamed of that you see a psychiatrist. It's an opportunity for development rather than just being put on medicines that nobody feels good about.
Exactly. So now we have, Dr. Rediger, Cynthia from Maryland. She is the president of one of the spiritist centers in the area, and she has a question to you. Hi, Cynthia. Welcome to Kardec Radio. Thanks for joining us.
Hi. Thank you very much for taking my call. I have a question for you, Dr. Rediger.
Sure.
I am a spiritist, and I have worked many years in what we spiritists call spiritual treatment. Not exactly what you have witnessed and experienced with John of God, but still, we have seen many people being helped in their physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual ailments. We have also seen people who did not obtain the same result. Well, Spiritism teaches that for one to be healed, at least two factors must be in alignment. First, what we call receptivity, when the patient wants the treatment, accepts the treatment, and has faith in the treatment. Yeah. And second, we know diseases sometimes may be a tool or mechanism for the growth or progress of the soul. Yeah. The healing would get into the way of this. So my question is, after everything you know, what is your perspective regarding the positive or negative outcome of patient healing?
Well, probably that's a great question. There's probably many ways to talk about that. I ask you a question again because it's got many pieces to that. The positive outcome or the negative outcome of people's healing?
Yes. Let's say we do everything we can for the patient, and I'm talking right now about the spiritual treatment, this type of healing, even the type of healing that John of God did. Yeah. Not all patients, have what they expected. They don't get healed as they expected.
Well, that's true, and I think that Kardec is very clear, though, and I think he's right. He says it very eloquently that some illnesses are meant to be borne as burden and as an education for the soul. And so what our illnesses do sometimes is purify us and remove the dross or the impurities from the gold that lies within and is buried within all of us, I believe. So it's an education for the soul at times, I suspect.
Thank you, Cynthia, for bringing this reflection to us. There's so much for us to reflect. Thank you for joining us at Kardec Radio.
Thank you, Cynthia.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So, Dr. Rediger, you just mentioned previously that you've come across other healing mediums also in Brazil. Was it only in Brazil, and how about it in Brazil? Do you understand, or do you think there is an explanation for you on why John of God has attracted so much attention versus the so many other ones that also see thousands of people in a weekly basis?
Yeah, and there may be others who understand this better than I do, but I suspect that the fact that there's something very tangible about and dramatic with what he does with these visible surgeries, I suspect that he's playing a unique role, perhaps, in that sense. He has perhaps really cultivated or has been planted in a situation where he can cultivate a relationship for Americans in the United States and Europeans who are more skeptical and rooted in a physical understanding of the world. I think he mediates between the physical understanding of the United States and Europeans in a way that's accessible, probably, for those kinds of mindsets.
That's interesting, because we've come across so many of them that exist to date, like, for example, João Barbel in the state of São Paulo, and many others everywhere and elsewhere. For example, in Brazil, where Spiritism is so well known to date, right. And probably the cultural bridge up is different, and there are so many other reasons. People have been asking this, and it's one of the questions that popped in our minds we wanted to ask you. If you have comments or questions, you can ask us a question, send in a comment by writing to Kardec at kardecradio.com, or go to our website, kardecradio.com, and fill in the form about your comments and questions. By the way, if you do so, send in your address, we can send you the beautiful bumper sticker of the Kardec Radio, which is good to share the news that here we have this space, this, let's say, virtual space. Many people have been asking us why we're not connected to a specific local radio station. For this very reason, even if we go to Sirius satellite, we're not going to be able to reach out to the whole world, because did you know, dear listener, we have Kardec Radio listeners in more than 35 countries in the planet Earth, which means we cannot restrict ourselves to a specific local radio station or even to Sirius, because it's beyond the United States of America. Kardec Radio has a little more than a month of life and has become a true phenomenon, a phenomenon of healing of the soul, because here we have amazing minds like Dr. Jeff Rediger, who are courageous and very rational to propose revolutionary ways of dealing with ourselves and treating our minds. Dr. Rediger is, for the ones that just joined us in, is a psychiatrist, and he's the medical director of McLean Hospital Southeast, instructor in the Department of Psychiatry at Harvard Medical School, and he has also a master's degree in the Divinity School of Princeton. He has been publishing articles in medicine, psychiatry, and spirituality. And Dr. Rediger was recently brought to the national TV in the United States, and actually internationally, when Oprah was putting this show on John of God, the miracles, the healings, and Dr. Rediger came up with his personal experience, but not only that, as a psychiatrist and a researcher, and he opened this amazing center, the Center for Psychological and Spiritual Development, to dig deeper in that regard, and as he said himself, to join forces with others and to propose a change in the paradigm of the healing of the body and the mind. Dr. Rediger, thank you for being with us once again, and we have here Brad from Maryland who would like to ask you a question.
Good morning, Dr. Rediger. This is Brad, and thank you very much for being here and for illuminating us with what you've observed and experienced and your own thoughts. My question for you is whether in practice or through observation, if you have noticed whether the group therapeutic, the presence of a group has been more, had a greater effect of therapeutically in healing physically or spiritually of an individual than the individual just by themselves.
Yes, I am deeply intrigued by this idea that is operative at the CASA where John of God works. They have these current rooms that they call them, where groups of people sit and meditate as the people seeking healing walk in through those current rooms until they reach John of God, who's sitting in a chair at the other end. It's fascinating to me that John of God says that the current provided by these groups of meditators plays a significant role in the healings that occur. That is such a different understanding of medicine and healing than Western medicine has. I'm deeply fascinated by that, and it's something that Western medicine needs to understand much better.
Yeah, and thank you, Bradley, for making this question, joining us.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Rediger, you were talking about these new ways of treating and healing. What would you tell our Kardec Radio listener as, your proposal for what is ahead of us in regard to healing?
Well, I think that the movement of Western culture has been the movement of the world. If you look at the evolution of human culture in general over thousands of years, has been the slow development of our spiritual capacities and our right in our capacities as human beings to know each other and know God as individuals. And so, for instance, we have the slow development of democracy, finally the formal birth of democracy over 200 years ago. And then we have the slow evolution of human rights, slow development of understanding that all human beings have fundamental human rights, whether they're women or children, minorities, or even extended to the animals of the earth. Then we now are seeing the development of spirituality as a right and capacity of individuals outside of institutional religion. So individuals now have their own relationship with the spiritual world and with God. And slowly the authority structures of religion, medicine, government are all slowly being supplanted by the rights of individuals to know each other and God in their own rights. And I now believe that the next step in our evolution as human beings is to begin liberating ourselves from being so dependent on servitude to the material senses, to the world that we can see and touch, and begin realizing that our life and our being comes from something beyond all of this that we can see and touch. And that's where the healing comes from, when we realize the significance and goodness of our lives, that our diabetes, our hypertension, our obesity, our depression, many of our symptoms begin to subside, and we begin to focus on getting a life full of the dignity and goodness that we have the capacity to have. Our physical illnesses become less of an issue, and it's a very different orientation than Western medicine, which focuses only on removing symptoms and doesn't really make progress. We're seeing more illnesses and having a more difficult time mastering them than we easily admit or see.
Dr. Rediger, but the ultimate question is, you have been facing very likely the, let's say, the fury of the skeptics, or not?
So far, I've been shocked to realize that where I have to give McLean and Harvard a lot of credit, because there was a lot of drama going into the Oprah show, and then I was on the Dr. Oz show and Anderson Cooper 360, and looking at healing and experiences that typically academic institutions don't look at very easily and are skeptical about. And I will say, I could have lost my job. I could have had real repercussions in the academic world, and I haven't so far. Now, Oprah is a masterful interviewer. Dr. Oz is a wonderful, sensitive individual, and I've been very fortunate that I receive emails now and letters and packages from all over the world, and they've been overwhelmingly positive, and some of them have been from deans of medical schools, professors, physicians, and many other people in walks of life. And I've been overwhelmed by people telling me they're just grateful that I was able and willing to say these things. I've been shocked because it could have ended my career, frankly.
I think this is the highlight of everything that has been discussed in this show this morning, because you're bringing so much hope to all of us.
Well, to realize that the world's ready for something, and we just need to be thoughtful to help it happen, because people know this in their hearts. They just are afraid to let themselves know what they truly know.
Exactly, and it seems to us that people are ready for this combination of faith and reason, because Allan Kardec proposed it in mid-19th century, and people were not quite ready, but it seems that now humanity is ready for the marriage of all times, faith and reason. Would you agree?
I agree. I believe that the world is ready and waiting for something new, and now it's just a matter of giving words to it in the right way, in a way that's accessible to people and that connects with their inner experience of what they know is true, but they haven't always allowed themselves to give words to.
Dr. Rediker, we hope that in the very near future you would have time to join us again in a show and teach us much more, especially of the experiences you're researching and in the new proposal you're bringing to psychiatry and the healing of the mind as well. Would you like to share your final comments for today with our Kardec Radio listener?
Well, I just want to say I'm honored to be on the show. It's a wonderful experience to connect with people who think about things like this in a way that's so consistent with where I've finally come to and what I've come to believe. And, of course, it's because I've been educated and deeply influenced by Allan Kardec and my experiences in Brazil. But it feels like a very simpatico fit, and it means a lot to me, and I think we just need to get organized to really bring this change to Western medicine in general, because Western medicine is hurting Western cultures. We're going to kill ourselves off if we don't fundamentally change our understanding of the relationship of the physical reality to spiritual reality.
You're right. And again, we are truly thankful, and please receive from all of us for listening to him, and we'll be listening to you on demand, because, dear listener, every time we have a show, we post the whole show on demand for you. So share the good news with others, because what Dr. Rediker taught us today is life-changing. It's very transformative, and finally brings peace to our hearts, because we can combine our faith in God to the reasoning of the human mind. And thank you again, Dr. Rediker, and we wish you many blessings in your new venture in research and the caring for your patients.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, dear listener, what is lying ahead of us? Next week we'll be here. Our dear friend and also amazing mind, the psychologist, Carol Bowman. She's going to be with us to talk about reincarnation and you. Dr. Bowman is an internationally known author, lecturer, counselor, past life regression therapist, and pioneer in reincarnation studies. Her first two books were Children's Past Lives and Return from Heaven. The second one published by HarperCollins in 2001. And she was in many shows on TV. And she's recently, in 2009, she joined us first time in the Spiritist Symposium in Boston. And then last year, she published a book, one of her books, in Spanish through the International Spiritist Council's publisher, which was launched in the International Spiritist Congress in Spain in October 2010. So Carol Bowman is going to be with us talking about her interesting experiences with the patients, especially children who had previous lives memories coming up spontaneously, and how it's possible to heal it and tell people that really we've lived many lives. So here we are. We're going to close our show to tell you there is so much goodness in the world. We just need to tune in with minds just like Dr. Rediger. Let's send him our best blessings so he can count on all of us to support him in this missionary venture in psychiatry, healing, and healing mediumship. And thank you so much, dear listener. We'll see you next Saturday at 11 a.m.
Thank you for listening to Kardec Radio, broadcasting live every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Email us and share your comments at www.kardecradio.com. Until next time, we wish you many blessings.